Have you ever been in the zone? This is a common term used by athletes to describe a time during a game in which everything they did turned out great. It was virtually perfect. Every action, every move, every pitch, every play, every shot they made or took turned out awesome. While in the zone, they were able to do things and make those plays and make shots or play at a level that was far above their normal playing ability. Everything they did had that Midas touch. It turned to gold. Let me share with you a time in which I saw this happen right in front of my very own eyes. We were still living in Michigan, and I, for a few years, coached basketball. During one game, in the first half, this was a tightly contested game. At halftime, the score was 37-35. My two best players, my point guard and my shooting forward, had scored 9 and 13 points, respectively, in the first half. In the second half, both teams broke loose. We ended up losing 95-93. But what I want you to hear is what happened to my two best players in that second half. Everything they did turned to gold. Every type of shot they put up went in. They were taking shots that caused me as a coach to scream something like, "Don't take that shot!" But after winning the basket, to say something like, "Good shot, good shots." After a few times of this, I realized what was occurring, that both of these players were in the zone. So I started concentrating on ways in which we could take advantage of these players being in the zone. And they stayed in the zone the whole second half. My point guard scored 26 points that second half, ending up with 35 for the game. And my shooting forward scored 30 points in that half, ending up with 43 for the game. Now, it would have been nice to have some players in the zone defensively, but that wasn't the case. But these two young men, for that second half, were in the zone. So the zone in athletics is a time where a player or players play in such an awesome way that it just astounds people who are watching it occur. You know what? Athletics, though, isn't the only place where people can get in the zone, though. People can find themselves in the zone financially. Maybe you know someone who consistently and constantly seems to fall into great deals, causing you to ask, how do you do that? My father is one such individual. Over the years, I've been amazed at the deals in which he has been a part. Deals where he has, in my words, made out like a bandit. Times like when he bought a used vehicle for $3,000 and turned around 3 weeks later, turned it into a dealer for $4,000 towards another vehicle. Or a time when he had a truck dealer approach him because the dealer wanted my dad's model year of his Chevy truck. And so here's the deal that they made. The dealer got my dad's truck. My dad got a brand new truck for the difference of the tax. That was it. Not a whole lot of money. You see, it's possible to be in the zone in the area of finances. And the principles God teaches us in His Word are zone principles in the area of our finances. You see, God desires us to live in the zone in the area of our finances. There are those who do not believe that this is possible, that they will not experience what it's like to be in the zone financially. But these people underestimate God's ability, principles, and promises when they have this attitude. What is God's zone for our finances? God's zone for our finances is when we are free from the bondage of materialism and debt, able to give generously without a second thought as He directs us, and the ability to enjoy life without the stress and worry we can experience in the area of finances. Our passage this morning in Proverbs 27 gives us God's zone principles that will help us move into God's zone in our finances. Let's take a look at them. Zone principle number 1, and you can write this down in your notes from your bulletin. Zone principle number 1 is know my current and desired reality. Know my current and desired reality. In verse 23, Solomon says, "Be sure you know the condition of your flocks." I would like you to circle the phrase, know the condition, in your Bible or your sermon notes. Every journey has 2 points, a starting point and an ending point. In order to get where I desire to go, I need to know the starting place and the destination. During the week of Thanksgiving, Mary Jo and I and the kids are going to San Antonio to spend Thanksgiving with her youngest sister. Now, we've never traveled to San Antonio with Fort Dodge, Iowa as a starting point. So I went to Google Maps and I put in our address and their address and got the direction. Now, what would have happened if I didn't know my starting point or my destination? How would Google Maps have been able to give me directions if I didn't know from where I was starting or where I wanted to end up? It couldn't have done it. I needed to know both in order to get the route I needed to travel. And this is what Solomon is saying when he says, know the condition of your flock. continuing in Solomon's analogy, what would our response or thoughts of someone be if they said they owned 1,000 sheep when in reality they only had 100? Or if they said their sheep were healthy and well fed, but when we looked at them, they were all skin and bone? If your response would be anything like mine, the comment would be something along the lines of, he's not living in reality, or he's a few fries short of a McDonald's Happy Meal. He doesn't know what he's talking about. In order to get started on the journey to God's zone financially, we must know our current reality and our desired reality. And if the desired reality of God's zone means living in such a way financially where we are free from the bondage and full of materialism and debt, such a way that we are living, enjoying life, a life of contentment, and able to give generously and cheerfully when prompted by God, then we must understand our current condition in order to begin to formulate a plan of how to get to that desired reality. And how do we determine what our current reality is? There are certain things you need to know. First, do you know your household income? Do you know how much money you are bringing in during the month? Second, how much debt do you have? How much debt? List all your debt and the current balance of each debt. Third, determine your living expenses. Things like your giving, your housing, your utilities, your transportation, insurance premiums, entertainment, miscellaneous expenses, etc. And fourth, determine how much you have in savings currently. And this will give you a snapshot of your current reality. You see, the first zone principle is knowing my current and desired reality. Now, in order for God's zone to become my reality, I must make a plan to get there. And that leads us to the next zone principle. Zone principle number 2, I must tell my money what to do, or it will tell me what it's going to do. Did you catch that? I must tell my money what to do, or it will tell me what it's going to do. Look at the end of verse 23 and verse 24. Give careful attention to your herd, for riches do not endure forever, and a crown is not secure for all generations. Circle the phrases, give careful attention, riches do not endure, and a crown is not secure, if you would. When Solomon says we need to give careful attention, he is telling us that a plan is needed to care for and use our riches wisely. If careful attention is not given, we will discover how quickly our riches will diminish and ultimately leave us, leaving us to wonder, where did it all go? There are certain habits, attitudes, and mentalities that we can possess that can cause our riches to quickly leave us. These include like impulse spending habits. Walmart, Hy-Vee puts the milk at the back of the store for a reason. You have to walk by everything else. Impulse. Or the spend it all mentality. Or the attitude that I must keep up with and even get ahead of my neighbor in materials and financially. These are detours that make the journey to God's zone longer and more difficult. And in order to make the journey to God's zone, I must plan each month how to use every dollar that is coming into my household, spending every dollar on paper before the month begins, telling each dollar where it is going and what it will be doing. This is called a budget. And no, it's not a swear word. Budget is not a swear word. The first part of giving careful attention is budgeting my riches every month. And there are different budgeting resources that can help you do this. The one thing I had discovered about monthly income and expenses, I can't put out more in monthly expenses than my monthly income. I am not the federal government. Budget items should include things like the tithe, living expenses, debt payments, money set aside for clothing, gifts, fun, special occasions, auto repairs, etc. And once all these items are budgeted with a monthly amount, with however much is left over, you can move on to the second part of giving careful attention, which is creating a $1,000 emergency fund. If you find that once everything is budgeted, you have no money left over, you need to do one of two things. Either trim your budget somehow or increase your income. The reason for creating that emergency fund is that eventually, guess what? Mr. Murphy will get around to visiting you. Stuff breaks or needs replacing, and eventually that costs money, and hence the need for the emergency fund. So it's important to fund this emergency fund first. And with it, when Mr. Murphy does visit, you won't have to stress about how and where in your budget to fix what broke. You use that emergency fund and then replace that money. Once you set aside the $1,000, it is only touched in case of an unexpected emergency. And no, coming across a ridiculously low-priced plasma flat panel HD TV does not qualify as an emergency. You see, the third part of giving careful attention then is to reduce the amount and eventually eliminate your debt. The first step in reducing and eliminating your debt is not to add any more to it. That means not taking out another loan or another credit card. That means not adding to the balance on any credit cards you currently have. You may even want to cut up your credit card. Mary Jo and I haven't had a credit card for over 15 years. We use a check card. And some have an attitude that a credit card is necessary and not every place will accept a check card. Yes, that is true, though the number of places is diminishing. But you see, what that tells me, when someone doesn't want my check card, that means they don't want my money. And my money and I will go where we are wanted. The reasons for not using a credit card are varied, but let me give you a couple. First, the majority of people carry a balance on their credit card, with the average amount of credit card debt in households which have credit cards being over $15,000, according to last month's edition of Forbes magazine. People talk about paying the amount that they put on it every month, but most are not disciplined enough to do it. The amount of interest they pay each month is reason enough not to use a credit card. Second, if you are one of the disciplined ones who does pay off the balance every month, I first of all applaud you. That's good. But I would like you to be aware of something. There is a reason why companies encourage people to use credit cards rather than cash or even a check card. These people are not dumb. They have done the research. The research shows that when we use credit cards, we spend more. We spend more. It's shown that on average, a person will, when using credit cards, will spend 18% more than cash and 12% more when using a check or debit card. That's a lot of money. The stores and companies know this, and they're out to make as much profit as possible. Just something to consider. The second step in reducing and eliminating your debt is to do what's called the debt snowball. This is how the debt snowball is done. First of all, list your debts: credit cards, auto loans, personal loans, school loans, etc., but excluding your mortgage, smallest to largest. Second, with the leftover money from your monthly budget, put that excess toward paying extra on the smallest debt. And when that debt is paid, take what you usually sent to that payment, the normal monthly payment, and send it to the next largest debts. Do this until every debt except your mortgage is eliminated. You may say, this sounds like a crazy way to live. You are probably right, but it has been said, live today like no other so that tomorrow you can live like no other. Let me say that again. Live today like no other so that tomorrow you can live like no other. Think about what would be possible if you weren't sending all that money to pay off debt. If you weren't sending money to pay on a car loan. The average car note is over $400 a month. Think of if you weren't sending all that money to Mr. MasterCard or Miss Visa. Think about what you could do with that money. How much more would you be able to give, save, and enjoy if this was your reality? You see, this is God's zone in finances, and it is achieved by giving careful attention to our money. Zone principle number 2, I must tell my money what to do, or it will tell me what it's going to do. This is the path that will take us to God's zone in the area of our finances, and that leads us to zone principle number 3, which is God blesses us when we use His zone principles.